Recording in progress.
It is planting season. Take a little deeper. Okay.
Morning, everyone. This is a special meeting of the Facilities and Infrastructure Committee, the purpose of which is to discuss the downtown facilities. Since our discussion was going too long the other day, and we decided we needed a special meeting. Have the full committee here. I think we're also joined by our chair, Shauna Black, and I see Dan's here. Mike Ziegler, I see Ann Corman and Rich John on Zoom. Did I miss anybody? So we've got 10 out of 14 legislators. That's a pretty good showing here this morning. It's an issue I think that's important to all of us. I know Bill Troy's been working on some of the issues that we have raised, particularly with respect to the deconstruction of buildings. And Bill, do you want to mention anything? And I think you've asked me if we could have possibly an executive session to talk about your advice to us.
I mentioned that. I don't know if we can do it, though, with this many people signing in from away.
Well,
let me just give you a brief overview of where we are. This is what I would call the land of the gray, which is what most of the law is. So there are some black and white rules, and this is really a lot of gray here. So traditionally, what will happen is, if in our situation, reading the cases as I have, is the municipality that's coming in and wants to exercise their rights normally will come in and try to speak to the home team, if you want, and review with them what their plans are as best they can and see if they can reach some sort of an accord. If they can't, then they have the option either of completely just throwing in and doing what the home court team wants to do, or they can start to say, no, we are a separate municipality and we have certain rights. And I've circulated to all of you the actual case. I don't expect you to read it today, just so you can see what we're all talking about here. And when they define it that way, in other words, the incoming agency that wants to use the land, the burden's sort of on them to prove why they're not bound by the local rules. And that really almost certainly involves litigation being entered into, unless there's a meeting of the minds. All right, and usually what will happen is the agency, that the home agency will say, we want the following. The new, I won't say the intruder, the new gang in town will say, no, we have these rights, and you try to work it out. And if you can't, one or the other team goes to court, is what happens normally, unless you can work it out. And what happens in court, we just don't know. It takes time to work these things out. I've circulated another decision from 1991 when the county was trying to put in on Commercial Avenue the property, the facility we were going to use for our solid waste, and it was 4 years of litigation because the city wouldn't go along with it. So it can be a time-consuming event. There's no black and white rule as to how to proceed with this. They can come to us, they being the city, and ask for us to play open book what we plan to do, and that's a tactical and political decision. You know, we're going to probably should tell them as much as we can, with the understanding they may try to use it against us, but I can't say that they're entirely precluded from knowing what's going to happen in their town or village or city. So, but we have our own rights to raise if we can prove and convince to a court, and it's going to come down to a judicial determination that we as a separate sovereign have the power and the need to do these things, and it so happens to be on that land, and the way we're doing it meets all the rules. Having said that, I'm happy to take questions from people. I wish I could be dogmatically sure that if you look at this case, this solves everything. I think you'd see something different. I've seen some people with this document, governmental immunity from zoning and other legislation, which I think succinctly captures the basics of it, but not all the details of it. And there really aren't a whole lot of cases reported on this, which is, to me, striking and passing strange. But this is how I've understood it. This is my understanding. I've talked to counsel, and before we were to go forward and really dig our heels in on something like that, I would recommend that we retain the services of a particular law firm, which I've mentioned before. There's a fellow there who I actually had as an adversary once in the village of Lansing, and he came in and he was so professional and such a good guy to straighten something out that I've kept his name in my brain. That doesn't happen very often with people, but so I would recommend, I'd ask permission to retain his services since he does this as a living. And we've talked about this before, and he was actually online once when we were beginning to address it, and we decided that late night
Oh, yeah, but, you know,
that
now
we
you're getting-
didn't really need
that was
his
done in
service.
executive session. We don't want to talk about
Right.
what was done in executive
Right,
session.
right. But I'm just saying, we've talked to him once before. I hold him in the highest esteem. I think he's very able. It's his partner who served as counsel for Rich John in the matter that's just been wrapped up. And I think Rich can speak to this if he wants, was satisfied with the firm and the particular lawyers he dealt with. But I will be the first to tell you, I've done these types of cases, but not where we're at this level of granularity. And I would like to run this by somebody with some real experience, even if it costs a few bucks. And he has the experience, which I don't have.
To add to Bill's comment, I thought we were well served by our counsel from that firm.
I'm sorry, Rich, what point are you making?
Bill had just asked for my comment. I thought the county was well served by the counsel we used from that firm.
Ann?
Thank you. I just wanted to ask, Bill had said that he didn't think we could go into executive session, but I'm just wanted to question that is if we're asking for advice right now, if that's what we're doing, it shouldn't matter if some people are remote, right? We could go into executive session if we wanted.
I thought we could go into executive session. That's what I was...
I would be far more comfortable having these conversations in executive session.
To this point, nothing I've said really violates anything.
I'm
It's
seeing
just,
nods from our staff.
Yeah.
When do we want to do that? Do we want to do that now?
Now.
Or do you want to do it later in the meeting? What's the pleasure of the group?
I don't see that we can go forward and accomplish anything without hammering out these legal issues.
All right, well, we're going to need to know who's to be in the executive session with the legislators at this point. All right, we're going to need a motion to go into executive session.
I'll move that.
Been moved by Deborah. There's a second by Randy. All those in favor of going to
Point of order.
executive session for the purpose...
Specifying the purpose
I'm
to...
just about to do that. For the purpose of obtaining counsel from our county attorney on issues that may pertain to litigation. Those in favor of going to executive session? Any opposed? Actually, only the committee can vote. But I think it was unanimous by the committee. Okay, so who do we want here? Our legislators, certainly, our county administrator. Let's see.
I think we'd like Katie.
Katie, I think Jay should be here also.
And Arel. Yeah.
I see Amanda's with us now, and so is Susan. And Katie, should we have Megan and Norma? All right.
Yeah, I think it would be great if we could.
Okay.
Thanks.
All right. Most of the people that are on the screen are to be in the executive session, so We'll let Rob tell us when he's ready to go for executive session.
Recording stopped.
Dominic can be here.
Okay, we're back in regular session for the special meeting of the F&I Committee. I didn't ask if anybody had any changes to the agenda. Were there any? So let's talk about the resolution that we have in draft form to deconstruct the property at 308 North Tioga Street. That's the legal building, which would be done only after it was vacated, of course. Randy, you want to speak to that?
Yes. It's been talked about quite a bit that it's a dilapidated building, and visually it may be, but physically isn't. So I think before we should consider tearing it down, we need a structural exam. Yeah, I think it would also help us say, hey, if we do need to take it down and vote to take it down, here's our reasoning, because structurally it needs to be taken down. So that's my thought on that.
Greg.
I hear what you're saying, Randy, but I also think that you know, we need to ask the question, are we actually going to use that? Is that the size, the footprint that we want to use? Because it may be structurally sound, but it may have no purpose in the grander plan. And I think a lot of the challenge in this conversation is which piece of information to consider first, or which decision to make first, right? Do we want to save it? Do we not? I feel like spending the money on a structural, at least for me, isn't necessary, because I don't see value in that building for the county anymore based on what I'd like to see happen at that site. But I think the issue with this whole process is we're jumping in at various decision points and trying to make decisions, but not making really any at the same time. So I don't know. I feel like I'm rambling.
Deb.
Yeah, I mean, I think further to your point, Greg, what the essence of the question is not necessarily, is it structurally sound, but is it usable by the county for the purposes that we need? And while there seems to be some debate about the functionality of the bank building, I don't think anybody's seriously arguing that we'd want to put our people in that legal building, or that it could really function well if we did. So, and as far as the structural soundness of that building, I think that's kind of up in the air, having looked at the ceiling and the roof and some of the other things. Anyway.
It's really a block building. It's got a fancy front, which I would hope could be repurposed somewhere through
We could put it on a bridge in Dryden.
I'm sorry?
We could put it on a bridge in Dryden.
No, those all go out to Groton.
Okay.
That's a great idea. But I guess the question is, and I guess this is for Bill and Lisa, and maybe Katie, are we ready for this resolution at this point?
Don't we need the seeker first?
We have a seeker. My understanding is it was completed, these two buildings were purchased with the intention of deconstructing to build one larger center of government. And I think to the points that have been raised, if we take it on its face value, separate from that question of whether we're building a center of government, it becomes problematic. If our plan is still to construct a center of government, these decisions and the seeker, I think we're all set.
Mike.
So I've thought about all of these options quite a bit, actually. I would actually like, and this may be too far outside, nobody might be comfortable with this for all I know. I would like to see two competing plans, frankly. I would like to see one plan where we knock down Building C, you knock down the bank, and you knock down this building, and you build one large center of government. I would say you guys are going to have a meeting with the city on Monday, apparently. I would ask the city, you've outgrown long ago your city hall. what if you not were a partner so much as a leasee? If you were to lease space in this, would they like to do that? Because, hell, we're starting from a blank slate here. And this will be your only opportunity in an entire generation where it'll be one less thing for the city to worry about if you're leasing space from us. I would like to see another plan, though, where we don't knock anything down, where we keep those 3 buildings and we renovate all 3. And we put the clerk in one building, we put the DA in another building, and then the other building, which is assessment and the Board of Elections right now, can we go up on that building? Do we move them maybe into another building? Maybe building C is more appropriate for some other department. And heck, it was suggested to me yesterday, maybe we go with a 3rd option altogether and we don't do any of that and we move to the mall, which sounds like a crazy idea, but that's where the hospital's going. That seems to be a center of gravity, for the county. So I don't know. I would like to get 3 options, and then we as a legislature kind of just pick an option. And I may not like the option that gets the 8 votes, but at least then I can say, listen, that's the one that got the 8 votes.
Donna.
Yeah, I feel like instead of adding options, we should be taking down options. We've been discussing the center of government for
As long as we've been on the legislature.
a good 5 years. And I understand that half of our colleagues were not there at the very beginning. And I'm hoping that through Lisa's presentation that, I won't say you've caught up, but you have all the information, or at least a good amount of information to base some decisions. The one thing that I never or hardly ever believe in is spending more money towards consultants, architects, and doing studies, because I think it's just wasting money. I will say, as far as the city, I'm not sure that we would want to do any more partnerships until there's stability there. My understanding is that from a fiscal standpoint, I have concerns being a partner with them. And then the other thing is, we realize just within our government how long it's taking for us to make this decision. It's like adding a 3rd person to the marriage. I think it's a bad idea.
Lisa?
To one of Mike's proposed options, I wondered if Arel could speak to the space within the current structures, the Key Bank building, the professional building, and the Annex C, because we have done recent space studies through Holt Architects, and they're updated. And so, Arel, could you speak further to whether there's space in those buildings?
The Key Bank has 7,236 square feet. The professional law building has 6,237. And I know, maybe a month ago, I looked at some of the departments were being considered for the center of government, and which could fit into the Key Bank at least. And we had several, scenarios of what that could look like. Typically, it was looking at bringing departments that are leasing space, like assigned counsel and human rights. They're small enough that could work, either two departments like that in the Key Bank. But beyond that, it would be difficult to get some of the larger departments. One possibility could be like county clerk could fit in the building. We have not completed the structure or the building condition assessment of the Key Bank building and the code evaluation of that. We've identified major issues and concerns for the Key Bank. And in talking with our consultant, we expect to have cost estimates before the next F&I committee meeting. But we've identified things like the glass and frames around the entire perimeter of the Key Bank would need to be replaced. They're rusted, they're cracked, and we would not want to move or occupy that building without correcting those. Some issues with the mechanical system, The roof, for the most part, is in good condition, just some drainage and issues that would need to be taken care of. It is not ADA compliant as far as bathrooms, so we'd have to redo those. That would be costly to do because the areas where they're located, it's all concrete walls around it. I think the assumption we had made is that we would not be doing any tenant improvements beyond painting and maybe carpeting. We were not either be putting new walls or demising existing walls. There were a few other ADA requirements. Does not have a fire alarm system, which we would need to put in there. Does not have a sprinkler system, which we could or could not install. That would be probably very costly to do. But as I said, we expect to have the numbers in probably 2 weeks' time to present to the next F&I committee meeting. We have not looked at the professional outbuilding beyond just a visual inspection. I mean, structurally, that's my background, civil structural. It's not collapsing. It's not anywhere near the Baker Dental building. There are no active leaks that we've seen. It is just, it's dated. It needs improvements and renovations to be done to it. But I have not seen structurally anything that would indicate that there are some structural concerns at that building. But as I said, I've not received any direction from this committee to move forward with any evaluation, either a building condition assessment or code evaluation or structural assessment of the professional law building. It's a smaller building. It's about 1,000 square feet smaller than the Key Bank building. I think the Key Bank building is more open. Those that have either walked through it, you could occupy all of the first floor. The second floor is more like an atrium, so it's about half the size of the first floor. It's got a full basement, but we would not be able to occupy it beyond storage and mechanical spaces. But as I've indicated, there are improvements that would be required, and so you will have an idea of what those costs will be in about 2 weeks' time. As far as, I think, was it Building C was brought up as well. That building has been neglected for over 5 years. The direction was given to me by County Administration Jason at the time when the county purchased the 400 block was to not focus on any renovations and improvements at 2 buildings, which were the Building C and the old jail. The old jail, we were already underway with schematic design, and we'd already had an estimate of $2.75 million to do improvements at the old jail. We had not started doing anything at Building C, but we've identified many deficiencies at Building C, and those of you that have walked around the building, you've seen that it's deteriorating around really the face that looks on Key Bank. It's falling apart, so we would have to really redo the facades of the building, upgrade mechanical systems. We've not touched done any electric or energy improvements at Building C because the plan had always been that building was going to be deconstructed when we moved forward with the center of government. So if that's not the case, then we would have to go back and do energy improvements to that building. The reason we didn't do them, and I mentioned this to F&I several years ago, is because if it didn't make sense to invest money there, and if we're not going to have the building for 4 years, that would be wasted money. We have not, as I said, done a formal assessment of Building C to give you an idea of what improvements we would need to make there, but we have not done a renovation to that building since 1997. So it's due for major improvements and renovations, including elevator modernization, which we did not do during this last round because, as I said, we knew that the future of this building was unclear. So that's as much as I can share at this point. If you've got any questions, I didn't want to give too much information or not enough, but if there are any questions, you can go ahead and ask.
We appreciate that information.
Thank you. Aurel, I was really, thank you for that. I was hoping to speak to the square footage needs from the space study. estimated between 43,000 and 51,000 square feet in a new building, and the Key Bank and the professional building combined don't get us there. So unless we are going to change direction in terms of not wanting to pull other departments in from leased space, we know we have to get the clerk and the DA out. We're not going to get any new space from Building C or beyond maximized there. So I think, in short, that those three buildings are not going to give us what we need for the amount of space that we're looking for, unchanged.
Mike, I do want to mention that before we sold the old library site, which I continue to feel was a bad thing that we did, we worked with the city to see if they wouldn't be interested in a joint building there, which would have made a lot of sense for exactly the kind of things that you're saying. They kind of turned us down flat on that.
Clarify, I'm not talking about us partnering. We would be leased and they would be a tenant, which,
well,
that's different.
Okay, all right, that's different, but it still would have to have been large enough for both programs. Okay. But that's water over the dam now. 5 years later, we're actually getting close to having a building on that lot. I know how popular the idea of building a center of government is. It's been popular for a long time. I know there's a lot of desire for a new building. I wish there was 10% that much desire for solving the problem with the jail, which is in worse condition than a lot of places where we have people working or where we're renting space. But that's human nature. Wouldn't this be neat? Traditionally, jails are not very popular to spend money on. And we've put into the capital program money for a center of government. We really haven't got money in there for the jail project that we should have. And that's part of our committee's work as well, once our extension through this listening committee gets through. But I do think it's important to understand that there are and continue to be options, and there are priorities that we have, and we still don't know what the economy is going to do, as Deb has told us many times. So that we continue to look at different options. I really liked what Rich said. Let's talk about the whole plan. We plan to do something, but the pieces aren't all together yet. I just wanted to say that. Let's see. I think Deb and then Lee.
Well, a couple of things that I wanted to address. I mean, first of all, the jail issue, Mike, I mean, we've made a decision in the capital plan to move forward with the center of government. And quite honestly, our employees, some of them are working in offices that are the size of closets. And they've been hanging in there because we've promised them that we're going to be building a center of government, and that will improve the environment in which they work. I mean, we talk all the time about how valuable our employees are. I think it's time we put our money where our mouths are. I mean, you can only tell people for so long they're valuable, but you put them in a closet and you don't pay them enough, and they're not going to feel very valuable. That's one point. The other thing I wanted to mention, I know that this thing about putting the center of government out at the mall keeps coming up. And the attractiveness, I think, of the mall is in part the parking solution is, outstanding. But I don't know how many of you are familiar with what's happened with the ownership of the mall recently. The mall has been subdivided. They had to get special zoning put through for 0 lot lines. And so what they've ended up with is selling off chunks of that mall. And so we would buy a large piece of the mall, but you also have like this homeowners association kind of arrangement where you have to assume a collective responsibility for the infrastructure around the mall, including the parking and the roads. And I got to tell you that that has not worked well. I mean, if you've been out there and seen how that infrastructure is maintained, it's not maintained at all. It's going to be very expensive if they ever get around to doing it. So that's one problem you're not going to have any control over, because if you've ever lived in a condo, those homeowners' expenses will hit you out of the blue. And the other piece of that is that the subsurface infrastructure, the water and sewer, it has been a constant problem with that mall because it was built kind of piecemeal, both before and after the village was incorporated separately from the town. At the time, the town didn't have particularly good zoning and site plan approval processes. Nobody knows, I mean, you cannot get a complete map or whatever you call it, or schematic of what that infrastructure is under the ground. It floods all the time. The village keeps trying to get the mall to address the problem, and the mall keeps saying, well, we don't have any idea what's under the ground, don't you? The mall is just not as nifty a solution as some of you all think. You know, I've been dealing with that mall for years now, because before I was on the ledge, I was on the planning board there. And there are some real problems with the mall, however enticing the parking seems. So just want y'all to know that.
I don't think that we've actually suggested doing that, although it's come up. And I do think it's important that the city of Ithaca understand that there is certain elements on the legislature that have brought that issue up. Greg.
If I could just, that conceptually, right, not definitively, the idea of, is there some other larger parcel somewhere that needs an adaptive reuse, that needs repurposing, that needs something, right? The mall may be one of those things, right? So conceptually is, and especially if there are challenges or barriers or roadblocks within the city, but I think the most important question in this process is, how are we best serving our constituents? How are we best serving and how are we improving the service and access to the residents of Tompkins County through this? Taking care of our employees and their ability to perform their jobs is one of the pieces that gets us to being able to provide the highest and best service at the most appropriate cost possible, right? So I think, but we need to remember why we're here, what we're doing here, and it's to make sure that we're serving the residents of Tompkins County to the best of our ability. And one of those pieces is serving our staff. Another piece is easy access to government and government services. And so I think the mall is maybe an actual suggestion, but also to a sort of a theoretical suggestion of, is there somewhere else outside of a very restricted, dense area that we could explore this, that's still relatively centralized to the center of the county. So that's why I think we're a lot where that comes from. Obviously, every site, every location has its unique set of challenges.
Warner has some land for sale.
A lot of land for sale. Lot of nice offices too, if anybody has seen the listing.
And a pool, just saying.
And a pool, yeah, and a pool. I think we need to keep front and center how best are we serving our constituents, and to go back to, I think, to the original point that Randy made, or some colleagues have been making about repurposing the existing buildings that we own on that corner. It gives us no growth potential. We're pumping money into temporarily updating older buildings and older stock with no growth. I mean, I feel like we'd be at capacity from day one. We'd probably be under capacity, I think, to Lisa's point about space needs. And we still wouldn't solve any consolidation issues. I don't always think that the current legislature has to honor the will of the previous legislature, decisions if new information comes up. But I do think that the course has been set a little bit. There's no, in my mind, there's no real compelling reason to come off course. And I think the plan has sort of been laid out and been voted on. And if there's 8 or 9 of us that can get on board with a plan, I think we should keep moving forward, because at the end of the day, not everybody's going to agree on the optimal solution. But if there's enough, at some point we've got to make a decision, because this plan and project has been in this debate purgatory of a process for quite some time. So if you don't like it, and there's enough of us that do, I apologize, but at some point we need to move, because we need to do better by our employees. We need to do better by our residents and our community.
I'm going to take Ann, then Rich, then Randy.
Lee was way ahead of me.
Then Lee. All right, who was first among that group? Lee was first. All right, Lee, then Ann, then Rich, then Randy. And I just want to, I'm going to stick myself and just say there is lease possibilities out there in the temporary sphere. I'll just leave it at that. Lee.
Kind of following up on Greg here, I'm one of 14. I guess it's just time for me to lay my cards on the table. I respect the work that has been done and the groundwork that's been laid over the years toward getting toward a center of government project. The conditions in 2019 and 2020 before things collapsed probably lended themselves toward moving forward on the project. But I keep looking back at the big picture, and if we're talking $30 to $40 million to build a 30 to 40,000 square foot building, I'm not there yet, and it's going to be a long time getting me there. I'm looking at a project with the municipality elsewhere where we can't find contractors to build on a multi-million-dollar project. I think there were 2 firms that showed up at a public review session last week. Your interest rates have gone through the roof. We hear about the situation with the possibly having to take on the bonds at the airport terminal. I don't think TCAT is out of the woods yet. The assessments hit out my way. People are not real happy about what that potential has. I'm not there. And exploring all the options as have been suggested is still part of my thinking. And Mike, to your point, we can, I'll grant you, the employees don't have an ideal situation. We've been promising to do something for some time. But I look at Warren Road and what our corrections officers are working with and what the residents of those facilities are working with, and I can't in good conscience commit what resources we have toward a downtown county center of government at a time when we haven't seriously gotten a sense of what the scope is going to be and what the future expense may be at the public safety building. But I'm one of 14. If 8 or 9 are headed in another direction, I respect that, but I'm not there yet.
Ann.
Thank you. I say this as a former member of F&I who talked about this downtown facilities for quite a while, since for 4 or 5 years, and hearing what everybody said today and hearing all the different issues that our staff have talked about, I have been ready, and I'm more than ready to go forward with our center of government. And so again, I would, as a former member of this committee, I would just like to say that if this committee is not able to bring us forward in that, I would like to consider a task force or some other way for us to move forward.
To bypass this committee?
Direction from staff of how we can go forward, because we've been stalemated, and we keep, as Shauna said, we need to, I really agree with her that we need to not keep opening more options, is narrow down our options, and we keep opening up more options and stepping backwards. And any decisions we've made seem to keep going backwards. So I would like to figure out what staff need from us, or figure out how to go forward, because I was very frustrated spinning my wheels on F&I, feeling like we couldn't do anything. So those are my 2 cents. Thank you.
Rich?
Thanks, Mike, for letting me speak to your committee.
Of course.
I do share the reluctance to open new doors and look at new sites at this point. If we run into substantial barriers, then maybe we'd need to do that, but I don't think we're there yet. And I agree with what Annie just said about this has been a long, complicated process, but I guess I'm not so frustrated by it. This is going to be a very hard decision in lots of different ways. And as I'd said earlier, and you mentioned, Mike, I think a planning document might be useful to us that would provide an overall description of what we're trying to do here, that we are going to be making lots of individual decisions, but they really do tie together. And it's going to have options in it, such as maybe we do find some use for the key bank, taking into account all the things that Arel was saying about the difficulties of repurposing that building. It may have use to us, and so we should accommodate that. But our long-term goal is, I believe, to build the center of government. But we may take a long time to get there because of the economic environment we're in, the financing environment particularly, cost of construction. All of those reasons, I think we may look at this as a multi-year endeavor, and we probably should. So we may not build right away, but the document could make clear that this is where we're going. And I like the idea of having transparency for the public, but also for ourselves, so that we have some idea of what we're trying to build consensus around. Thanks.
Mike was next.
I just want to point out it's about 10:30. Go ahead.
Mike was next.
Oh, I thought you were next.
I'll be quick. I just,
Mike and then Veronica.
I just want to bring up, listen, I understand that people are a little frustrated and they feel like this has gone on a long time. I would like to point out that, there was this whole giant pandemic that kind of fell in the middle of this. And I think the legislature is being actually a little hard on itself. The pandemic sucked pretty much all the oxygen out of the room for all of this stuff. There was absolutely no way you were going to build a center of government in the middle of a pandemic. I mean, so when we act like, well, this has taken 5 years, or this has taken, yeah, yes, there was a global pandemic that basically shut down the economy. So I get that this seems like it's taken a lot longer than it has. Now, does that mean we didn't take action? No, we did, and I think smart action. This corner was never going to become available ever again if we didn't act on it, and that has given us an option that we wouldn't have had. So while I appreciate that people want to move and they think it's taken a long time, and it has, listen, yeah, there were a lot of mitigating factors behind that. So just don't be quite so hard on everybody, because, yeah, I think that we've taken some good actions. We've given ourselves some options. I'm not that worried about expanding those options, but other people are. So like I said, I'm 1 of 14. We'll see where it goes from there. So thanks. Don't be so hard on yourselves.
Was Randy next?
Go ahead, Veronica. I'll be next after you.
Okay. I just wanted to say, I think I'm also overall on team move forward. I do, Ed, just wanted to support a few things. I like Rich's idea of having a planning document to put together, because then we'd have something to point to and build from, instead of, I think sometimes we're debating on whether we have or haven't made this or that decision. And I know Lisa's done a lot of work that could go into that. Arel's done a lot of work that could go into that. I also think, I know it's been said, but could be reiterated that we can't ignore the costs of not moving on this project. Again, I know that was in Lisa's decision flow chart that's in the packet for this meeting, and Deborah's mentioned it, the cost of like the space use of keeping vacant buildings downtown and the cost to our staff who's, some of whom are in nice places, but some of whom are in closets, and we're sitting here in quite a nice space, I might say, as we contemplate all this. And I do agree with Mike that, a pandemic interrupted things. Obviously, I wasn't here for it, but maybe it's worth not being hard on ourselves, this changing body, for what has come previously, but like from this moment on, maybe we can move faster, I think, weighing like not just the cost of construction and deciding, but the costs of not that are hidden but real.
Boy, I agree with a lot of people and disagree. I don't think it's a good idea to go to the mall. I think we need to deal with the situations we have already. Although Newfield has no zoning, so it'd be easier to build there. To your point, Mike, and also Lee, on the committee, I don't know how it would go through the whole legislature, but I believe the public safety building should take the front lead so you could get it through committee, I think. But whether it made it through the rest of the legislature would be anybody's guess. I just think that's an absolute need. I respect the conditions our employees are working in. As somebody who worked in a basement of a bank building for 10 years, I know how no windows and living in concrete floors is no fun. But in banking, they give you a window and no pay. So I've always struggled with this when a company that wants to build something for you does a space study. It's in their best interest to say we need the biggest building we can get, right? So I've always struggled with that. Not that we don't need space, but this is a learning experience. I think Rich's point and other people's point, we need to walk this through. For example, Arel's talking about the Keybait building. We may not want to do anything with that. We may not want to knock that down. Why all the money? We want to put $1 million in something that we're going to knock down in 3 years? Probably a bad idea. Maybe we should be leasing space temporarily, and if the need is that great for current employees and staff. I wouldn't be opposed to that. And as well as the law building, maybe that's just no value in that. Let's just knock it down. Or maybe it'd be less expensive to renovate that temporarily to use that. I don't know. So these are things that are really important. We need to walk this. We have all these other issues about what we can build and what we can take down and whatnot. But I think a plan document, I agree, makes a lot of sense. So,
Deborah.
Yeah. If we start walking now, we'll get there in 4 or 5 years. That's the point. Yes, we need a plan. And one thing I want to point out to people is I'm watching what's happening in the banking and finance sector because that's where I come from. This banking crisis is playing out in a different way. And the way that it's playing out is a severe tightening of credit. Part of that is because banks are being more careful for any number of reasons that I won't bore y'all with. But part of it, too, is that people are anticipating a recession and businesses are not borrowing. And then there's the problem in the commercial real estate sector. What all of this suggests to me, because commentators are also starting to focus on the rising levels of unemployment in the construction sector, is that as we go forward and credit tightens for commercial developers, the cost of construction may go down. We should be ready for that. And we can't be ready for that if we don't have a plan. Now, yeah, I understand about the pandemic, Mike, but the fact is that since the introduction of vaccines, we've been able to see the end of this pandemic. That dates back to 2021, and now it's the middle of 2023, and we still haven't started walking. and I understand Mike gets indignant every time we start talking about taking this out of committee. But if this committee can't commit to moving this issue to the full 14 of us who have to make this decision, then there's something wrong with the committee structure. I mean, when we make important decisions, many of us vote things out of committee because we understand the decision is important enough that all of us should make it. I understand Lee's not ready. I understand Randy has reservations. I understand that you're reluctant to move it forward out of committee, but we have to. We've been sitting on this for a couple of years now. And if we're going to be ready to take advantage of changing market conditions, we need to start getting ready now. Please.
And I certainly understand that there are people who want us to make a decision and don't like the fact that we have a committee structure that says there are a lot of issues that have to be discussed. Let's spend the money. Let's do it. Let's you know, when I went to the former chair and vice chair and said we needed a special committee for the downtown, I was ignored. We just let the former county administrator move right ahead and start a project at the old jail without even talking to the committees or having a downtown committee. So there were things that happened over the years. Please don't say that we're just being obstructionist in some way. We're not. This is an important issue. Say something about the jail, folks. Say something about the jail that's been 20 years that we haven't done anything. And I'm sorry if I'm getting indignant about that. Somebody ought to. Somebody ought to think about the people that are up there. Somebody ought to think about what we need to have and have ignored because it's not a sexy kind of project. And the jails never are. Certainly a center of government will be more so. Say something about the jail. And I'm sorry to be upset, but it upsets me. Dan and then Shauna.
Thank you, Mike. So clearly it's a difficult decision. There's no dispute about that, right? This is a big, long-term, expensive decision with a lot of variables. Of course, we're struggling with it. Where I've come to is that there's really not much more new information that we need to take into account. I think, for the most part, we have all the information we need. So I think it is time to make a decision. It's a tough decision, but we have to do it. And yes, there's a lot of debate that goes into it, but we have done a lot of debate. We're still doing debate. There's a little more to come, but when there's no more information, at some point you need to stop debating and just vote. That's where I've come to. There's also one specific issue that I've been focused on a little bit lately in my mind, which is that we have to get out of the courthouse. We've been recently renewed that information has been reinstated from the state. We have to get out. So we need a plan for what to do with the district attorney's office and the county clerk's office. We can lease space somewhere. I mean, you know, it's not like an unsolvable problem, but it's so clearly tied in with this whole discussion, and we need to have a plan for how to address that issue. And this plan, if we can settle on something, would address that issue. So that's one piece that's driving it for me as well. I like Rich's idea of the planning document, because what that does, as others have said and Rich has said, is lays out a goal, but and also like Rich said, if it takes a really long time, it just takes a long time. That's the timeline is a different question than what direction we're going to go in. But you know, if we want to start looking for funding sources, we need a plan first. You can't just get money without having a plan of some kind. And then as far as the jail, Mike, I agree with you, and we do have this jail task force right now. So I think we are trying to address the issue right now. It's got a couple of months, I think, that it's going to take for this task force to work through. They're going to come up with something, and then in my mind, that might be the last piece of information we need in order to make our decision on this whole facilities issue. Thanks.
All right, where are we? Go ahead.
Yeah, so for one, I don't think that the jail has been ignored. I feel like it's in the background. And as Dan mentioned, there are actions that we're taking. We're waiting for the task force to meet. They're supposed to have 4 meetings. Not to mention the fact that we just spent $7.5 million to make the jail more functional. The price tag we received 3 years ago, before the pandemic, was around 20 to 30 million. We don't know where our numbers are, or they're going to be in the future with bail reform. Broome County has 500 beds, currently has 250 openings. And so I think for us to commit $20 or $30 million to upgrading our jail to a different standard and using pods, for one, at one point we thought that we would make that money in staffing. We'd only have to put 1 or 2 guards so that they can keep an eye on 20 or 30 inmates. We've been told by Department of Corrections that's not doable. More than likely, our staffing ratio will not change, and we're not going to save money with the staffing. And again, you know, I get that a jail's not glamorous. I personally don't think it's the time to invest in a jail because bail reform, our numbers are up and down every 2 weeks whenever Rich reports. One point we're sitting at 52, the next time we're sitting at 58, sometimes we go down to 39. We're just all over the place. And I think if we really want to talk about bail reform and social justice, the group's going to come in and say, you know what, we don't want to have a jail of 78 or 76, whatever the variance is. We don't want to have that number. If we're really going to talk about housing people and changing the system, it's going to mean reducing that number. And I think that's where the conversation will probably head, and that's what's going to come out of the jail task force, is reducing the number of inmates that we should be housing in our jail. So I think that's a very long conversation, and the priority, we've had the capital project, we've had the center of government in our capital project, which we have voted on every single year for the past 2 or 3 years, and we have not had these contentious conversations. We've known we've needed to go in this direction.
Amanda has her hand up, by the way.
Sorry, Amanda, I didn't see that. Go ahead, please.
Thanks. Yeah, I don't really have a lot more to add, but I am also, as Veronica said, on team
Breaking up, Amanda.
Yeah, you're breaking up a little, Amanda.
And your video's frozen.
Can you hear me now?
It's a little better, but.
No. Okay. I just move forward, and I also think it's important to look at the bail issue more fully. So.
Sorry, we lost you, Amanda. Was she done? Yes. Okay, well, thank you.
One last comment.
Randy?
Yeah, I'm not opposed to building a center of government building. I just, you know, I'm a planner. I'm trying to look down the road, and I'm trying to check off the things. And what Lisa's provided us, the document is very helpful. But there are a lot of moving pieces here, as we know, and we need to do it right. Mistakes were made in the past. I'm not blaming anybody. It is what it is. But let's, I mean, all those little moving pieces, like the buildings we currently have, may not be useful at all. I mean, I want to know that. I mean, and because that would speed things up, right? I mean, so I'm just trying to think through it. So,
Sean, I needed to ask a question on your statement you just made. Are you saying that this listening group that we've had is going to decide how many jail cells we have?
I think what my guess is that one of their recommendations is going to be to reduce the number of, they're going to request to reduce the number of inmates that we house.
Okay. All right, I guess
That's been my conversation with 2 of the members.
Thank you.
And I think that's reasonable.
I guess, is there anything else we need to talk about today? This resolution, we're not going forward with it? Is that the understanding of everybody? Okay.
Next F&I agenda?
Not unless there's a request for it.
I'd like to request it.
All right, then it'll be on as in draft form. Right?
What, I guess what did we accomplish with our special meeting today, rather than sharing what we've already all sort of shared and known to be true about each other? Or I guess what's the plan or the next step, or where are we going with this? Because I think that'd be a nice decision to come out of this committee today. Are we going to request a written plan? Are we going to put a resolution together for the next meeting to put together a written plan? Because I'd really not like the clock to run out on this and us be at the same place we were at the last F&I committee, because we've all, I think now all 13 of us, other 14.
We've given some legal direction in the executive session.
Which is a good piece, one of the pieces. I guess from an administrative standpoint or planning standpoint, where would such a written plan or document, is that drafted by the legislature? Is that drafted by county administration, by planning and sustainability? What would be the, I guess, will? Is that directed by facilities? What's, I guess, the will of the committee?
Is that something that this committee would like to see? Certainly, Rich has spoken to it. I would like to see it.
Yeah, I would too.
Randy?
I think either this committee or a task force focused on the plan would be a good idea. I'm a facilities manager, so I've had that experience of building and managing buildings, and tearing them down. And I don't have to be on the committee, but I think what's moved forward for me, Greg, is we really need to understand what we can do, right? So I think that's where we started today. But for me, those two buildings that we own, after hearing Arel talk about all the improvements those things need, I mean, we may not want to do that, but that's why I wanted I want to know what it's going to, it may cost us $2 million, or I just don't know. Maybe $100,000. But to move forward to solve the space requirement, which is immediate, I mean, it's not later on, we know we need space now. If we cannot use those buildings and we need to do something else, then we need to take action to do something, right? So, and if we build a building, decide we're going to build a building, it's 3 years before the building is going to be occupied, right? So I mean, that's where I'm thinking. I'm thinking about the immediate solutions and then planning correctly as we move forward. Like which buildings, like for example, a simple question would be, of all the people that are slated to go into this new building, how many of those departments actually have constituents come? I mean, so for example, do we get 30 visitors a day, 100 visitors a day? We know the parking for our people, but do we know what the parking need is for the people that we hope will come? So that's what I'm thinking about in my mind. So.
Would the committee entertain a motion to ask the chair of the legislature to assemble a special task force to address this plan, to come back to present to the Facilities and Infrastructure Committee that would be made up of a few legislators, members of staff, and have sort of a working task force?
We have a timeline for that?
I don't think that's a great idea. I think it's a great idea to put together the plan. I think we ought to ask administration to come back and consult on it and say how it feels it can help us create this plan.
But I guess who's us?
Our committee.
This committee is going to create the plan.
Sure.
So are we going to push everything else on the agenda aside for the next several months to make this plan, or are we willing to meet multiple times a month? I guess.
Well, I think you're overthinking.
I'm willing.
I mean, I'm willing too, right? I said
Me
last
too.
time, this is the most important job I have.
As long as it's not next month.
Well, I'm glad. Lisa.
So over the course of several months, the staff, namely the staff that are or were on this meeting today from planning, facilities, assessment, and administration have been meeting and pulling together materials, et cetera, and we probably have the skeleton of a plan which we could work on to bring back to the committee. If you would like legislators to join in that meeting in the interim, you're welcome to.
I think that would be fine. I think, if we need a special meeting of the committee, we can do that.
Let me ask one more question. This kind of builds a little bit with Deborah. We're looking at changing economic conditions, and we know that whatever we build is going to be 3-4 years out. We want to alleviate some of the stress on our staff and our clients, our customers. Do you have an interim idea to address some of the pressures at this point, whether it be the DA's office, the county clerk, some of the others? If it truly is going to be something that we do and move forward on, but it looks like a 2-3-4 year process, do we have some options that we're looking at to alleviate these stresses in the meantime? Because I don't want to leave that question open either.
That should be part of the plan.
And is that some of the thinking that's going on now elsewhere?
Are you asking, or do you want it to be part of the plan? Because
Yes and yes.
Okay. To this point, we have not been exploring interim solutions. We have been proceeding with the notion that these issues are going to be addressed through the center of government. So a plan could include interim solutions if a center of government is not going to be built or is going to be built further into the future than we were anticipating.
Well, we had this conversation about 3 months ago here that you're going to make a decision today. By the time we got done, we're 3 years out, 3 and 4. And as you bring me and others along, clearly we got to be looking at the interim stuff too.
I think to this point, the interim stuff has been renewing leases for departments who are in leases, and the Office of Court Administration thus far has been satisfied that we have a plan that we're working toward with center of government. So we have not sought interim spaces, but we can certainly speak to that more.
So let's give administration a chance to pull their stuff together. And then, Lisa, why don't you talk, and if we'd like a special meeting of our group, we can call that together. That make sense? Greg? You okay with that?
Yeah.
Randy?
Yeah, we'll see how it goes.
Lee? Deborah? All right, so that's how we get started with a plan. Anything else today? Get a motion to adjourn? Deb, seconded by Randy. All in favor of adjourning? Thank you for everybody who came to this meeting. It's not often that we get a group this size of legislators to come. We know it's important, and we appreciate everybody's comments, and we know that there are a lot of different pages, and we're all trying to assemble them into one notebook.